All right, clerk, call the roll. I see 9 in the room.
Senator Albritton, Senator Butler, Senator Chastain, Senator Figures, Senator Gudger, Senator Hatcher, Senator Hovey, Senator Melson, Senator Roberts, Senator Schofield, Senator Sessions, Senator Singleton, Senator Smitherman, Senator Wagner, Senator Allen, Senator Orr. And
Okay, we got 11 members present. Clerk, call the first bill.
House Bill 77 by Representative Garrett.
I'll be handling that for him, Chairman.
Go ahead.
HB 77 is legislation. We passed this same bill in 2022 with the Small Business Relief and Revitalization Act. It provides tax relief for Alabama taxpayers and small businesses. It affects over 3,100 small businesses throughout the state. We're taking the limit in 2022. We took it from $2,500 for pre-estimated sales tax for businesses over $500,000 to $5,000. This particular bill, what it does is it takes it from that threshold of $5,000 to $20,000. And all that does is, again, provides relief for over 3,100 small businesses.
Mr. Chairman,
Senator Smitherman.
what impact is this going to have on municipals' revenue? Because I'm telling you, y'all always be talking about your phone blowing up and folk calling, just like y'all phone blew up about due process. Well, my phone is blowing up the fact that we got all these bills and y'all taking money and all these licensing things, and y'all about to run my cities broke. I mean, I'm talking about taking 20 and 30% of their revenue, the total revenue so what impact? That's my major question to every one of these cuts and scrap that we talking about giving folks and feeling good about it and sinking our cities. So what impact does this bill have on my city revenue, my cities? And if just give you a laundry list, I'm talking about Hoover, Mountain Brook, I'm talking about Homewood, Birmingham, and all the likes. You know, so what impact? And that's going to be serious for me as we move forward. Not just, I ain't talking about this bill per se, but I'm making a general announcement that, hey, I can't go along with nothing under the sake of making a group of people who making tons and millions of dollars feel good by having citizens whose services got to be cut out under the name of them getting breaks. So please tell me.
I'd give you a high five there, Senator, if I could reach you. Senator Gudger.
Thanks. If you look at the fiscal note on this particular bill, at the very bottom line, it just says this reduction at the last line will be offset by the eventual collection of the actual sales tax receipts. So initially, since it goes from 5 to 20,000, there'll be an offset statewide of 15.2 million, but immediately it's offset as they collect the taxes. So there's not any difference that the cities are going to feel.
Yeah, so that's, you know, we're going to talk about where we are with all the tax cut, tax credit, tax exemption bills. So is there any other discussion? We got a motion from Senator Gudger. Is there a second on this good piece of legislation? I'll second it. And any other discussion? All right, here none. We'll call the roll.
Senator Albritton, Senator Butler, Senator Chastain, Senator Figures, Senator Gudger,
Aye.
Senator Hatcher, Senator Hovey, Senator Melson, Senator Roberts, Senator Schofield, Senator Sessions, Senator Singleton, Senator Smitherman,
Aye.
Senator Wagner, Senator Allen, Senator Orr.
Aye. All right, this will help small businesses. 14 ayes, 0 nays. The bill's given a favorable report.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you, Senator Gudger. Won't reduce revenues at all. It'll just help a lot of the filing that businesses have to do. The next bill, HB 85, the clerk tells me the Senate sponsor has requested that bill be carried over, so we will carry over HB 85 and move on down to the next bill.
Mr. Chairman.
Senator Smith.
I appreciate that sponsor doing that with this bill, because there again, I got some serious problem with these checkoffs.
Okay.
I mean, you know, we turned politics upside down in this state by telling AEA they could not check off nothing. and now we want to start letting folks check off. If check off ain't good for them, check off ain't good for nobody else. That's my opinion. Thank you. And I'm not trying to get it back for them or nothing.
Right.
But this body stood firm by saying check off, yada, yada, yada. Well, now, you can't do it both ways. Either blanket it, everybody ought to have checkoffs, or blanket, we don't need checkoffs. So I'm vigorously have concern about this and any checkoff bills that we have. Thank you.
Okay. Call the next bill.
House Bill 160 by Representative Faulkner.
Representative Faulkner, welcome.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. This is a companion bill that Senator Wagner and I have, and he's already passed out, just changing the name to the March of Dimes from the National Foundation.
Second.
Moved and seconded. Any discussion? Seeing none. Any objection using the previous rolls? Unanimous. Seeing none. 14 ayes, 0 nays. Bill's given favorable report. Call the next bill.
House Bill 156 by Representative Faulkner.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Members, the Birmingham Zoo has had an existing sales tax exemption limited to capital expenditures. This bill merely extends that date as they want to look at expanding the Birmingham Zoo to extend that to another 5 years.
We got a motion for favorable. Do we have a second? Senator Smitherman. Question, Senator Melson.
Well, I was going to support this, but that's Senator Smitherman. Oh, I'm sorry.
What I am, I'm about fairness. That's what I'm about. Hey, one thing about it, hey, if we gonna cut this one, I want to have a quick meeting with the chairman to talk about what we need to cut. So, Mr. Chairman, we want to meet right after this. That's right. No, I'm telling you what, I want fairness. That's what I want. Fairness.
We are, and we'll talk about this at the end of the committee meeting, but we are watching all these type bills, but to help facilities such as the zoo and other public, quasi-public, nonprofit type entities with their construction costs in the days of very high construction costs and lending costs, that this is a small contribution that we can help make. I don't certainly have a problem with it. Senator Smitherman.
I just want to say and respond. We're trying to keep the lions from eating you up when you come out there. And you want to get ate up, come on out there. I'm going to say, that's the man right there.
All right. Is there any objection to use a previous roll? All right. Seeing none. 14 ayes, 0 nays. Bill's given favorable report. Clerk, call the next bill.
House Bill 439 by Representative Faulkner.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Members, this bill is, as you can tell by the number, was filed a little later. It's just closing a loophole that the Department of Revenue and the Department of Commerce were supportive of this, and Revenue drafted this bill and the amendment to it.
What does it do?
So, Senator Smitherman, we had when the Growing Alabama tax credit, in order to take that tax credit, we had a provision in there that you couldn't transfer the tax credit from one taxpayer to another. But corporations, like one that we have in Birmingham, experienced a problem when they filed a consolidated tax return. So we had one corporation that has a subsidiary and filed a consolidated tax return. The parent company had cut the checks and had the Growing Alabama tax credit come back to them. But they needed their bank, their subsidiary, in order to be able to use the tax credits. Otherwise, they were worthless to the parent because the liabilities are all down with the bank, with the subsidiary. They file a consolidated tax return, and yet the department said, well, we understand that, but the way the legislation's written, we don't think we can do this. We agree this is a problem, and that it's the intent. Commerce supports this, believes it should happen. We want you to be able to do this, but we think it's got to have legislation to fix this. So we filed this, last week, got it through committee, got it out of the House and up here as fast as we could, and it's got the retroactive provision to 2021 in order to make sure these companies that file it's limited to companies that file a consolidated tax return. that they can, between parent and subsidiary, they can use those tax credits.
Mr. Chairman, I move favorable.
All right, it's been moved and seconded. Senator Smitherman.
I would just like to say that, you know, I realize that I'm selectively a part of your club, but it would be good to be a permanent part of it because, you know, being a legislative in the same realm, you're one of my reps. I don't know anything about this stuff till I get here. It's obvious my colleague must know, sitting to my right, I have an idea about this, but this is my first impression of it. And I just think that'd be more appropriate that if you could just have a conversation with me or send a memo and I'll come to you, but not to having said nothing to me at all until I get right here. And I know my other colleagues, just because I'm not in the party with you, they know and I don't.
I know.
And you know where I'm coming from.
Yes, sir.
You and I
have not spoken.
You and I have worked on too many major projects.
Yes.
From bridges to everything else.
Yes, sir.
For me to not get some information about activities related to something sitting right there in there and you sitting there, and my support will be needed.
Yes, sir.
Like that.
And Senator Smitherman, I want you to know I have not talked to Senator Wagner, Senator Roberts, or any senator.
But that's even worse.
Well,
That's even worse.
Well,
that's worse than what I'm saying.
I got phone called on this last week, filed it last week, passed it last week, passed it yesterday, and ran up here and got the good chairman here to put this on this morning so I could move it because of the time-sensitive nature. And I unfortunately have not had the chance to speak to any of my colleagues that I share districts with. So I apologize for that.
Okay, thank you.
Senator Sessions.
Representative Faulkner, did ADO bring this to you, realize there was an issue, or they're the ones, or was it Revenue Department? And basically what this does allows that parent company to collect that tax credit?
It allows the entity that filed, the corporation that files a consolidated tax return, whether it was by the parent or the sub, right, it allows them to take it, and no, it was not brought to me by the department. It was actually brought by a corporation in Birmingham.
They was dinged by the Revenue Department. So
They ran it up and were like, hey, why can't we get this tax credit? And it's useless to our parent company. And they talked to Commerce, talked to Revenue, ran it up the streams and said, and that's when they told them, you need legislative help. We feel our hands are tied. We want to help you, but we can't. So then Revenue, they got me involved, called me, one of the lawyers did. I called Revenue. Revenue drafted the bill, and with Commerce help.
Mr. Chairman, many times what will happen is you'll have larger corporations. And
Senator
they'll
Roberts, your record.
excuse me, Mr. Chairman. You have larger corporations and they do the federal consolidated, but not at the state level, and it gets a little complicated on that. But this must be one of their subs for which they did it, but the credit went back to the parent, so it gets convoluted. So if I understand the representative, that this just clears this up and will allow something like this to continue. Everyone probably thinks what's done is totally correct. It's just a sub versus a parent, would be my thought. So I renew my motion, sir, for favorable.
All right, any more questions, comments? Seeing none, any objection to use the previous role, adding Senator Singleton? All right, seeing none, 15 ayes, 0 nays, bill's given a favorable report. Thank you, Representative Faulkner.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I guess would it be appropriate for me to ask Senator Roberts to carry this bill now?
As long as he doesn't mention
Or Smitherman or Wagner.
163J, I'm well okay.
Now, can I be recognized?
Senator Smith.
I would gladly yield to Senator Roberts, but just for the record, remember we was in here in the last one you had. It's sitting in Senate District 18.
Yeah, I need help.
Nothing. It's sitting in the middle of Senate District 18, and you got to make a choice. Then I yield to this man right here. If you got to make a choice and it's sitting in my district, then I yield to him, and I'm gonna leave it there.
Okay. Senator, I need your help on another one too.
Yeah. All right. Thank you, Representative Faulkner. Clerk, call the next bill.
House Bill 213 by Representative Lovern.
Senator Livingston.
Good morning, Mr. Chairman and committee members. Several years ago, the legislature created the Voluntary Rescue student tuition reimbursement program. This is a simple change to that program that allows the associations to get reimbursed for the fee rather than the members individually. We had a number of members in our area that didn't have the money to go through the program, pay up front. The associations paid for it, and this just allows association to get reimbursed for it.
Second.
All right, moved by Senator Gudger, second by Senator Smitherman. Any discussion? Seeing none, hearing none. Any objection to the previous roll? 15 ayes, 0 nays. Bill's given a favorable report.
Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Well done, Senator Livingston. Okay, members, two things. One, the next bill, which I'll have the clerk call up. Go ahead.
Senate Bill 310 by Senator Orr.
All right, this is a bill I filed. We're only going to have a public hearing today on it because I think it's important for you all to be educated on this concept. It's new. We need to at least learn about it, hear how it works. It deals with retiree COLAs. All of us in the legislature hear about this issue, and this is something that our former LFO director, Mr. Norris Green, has kind of come up with and vetted with some of his colleagues and friends that are in this space and business. So they're going to come tell you all about the bill, how it should work, would work if it were to pass. And then I am going to call on the retirement system representative and local governments and to get their feedback as well on this and just educate you members. And I hope you won't be tempted to leave, but this is something as we deal with retirees and, bonus checks and COLAs and all that floating around, I thought it prudent just to bring it forward, take 15, 20, 30 minutes to discuss and hear about, and then we'll certainly be gone well before the general fund convenes at 11 o'clock. So I hope you'll hang around. Again, we will not vote this bill today, but hope that you'll learn something and learn about this unique concept that Mr. Green, who has the credibility to bring such a concept, has created. So this time I'll call on Mr. Green to come introduce the concept.
Thank you, Senator Orr. Before we start, just want to let you know, I am on the Retirement Systems Board of Control. I'm actually on the investment committee over there. I say that because I want you to know that I wouldn't bring anything over here that I thought detrimentally affected the RSA board. I'm also on Leanne's executive committee over at the association. We all have the same interests, and that's doing the best we can for retirees and keeping the system as strong as we can. Quick background. Since 2006, there has not been a COLA granted to state employees or teachers. The reason for that is somewhere a little before that, the groups that set the standards for pension systems came in and said, if y'all are going to do ad hoc COLAs, and by the way, Alabama's COLAs are considered ad hoc because we don't have in our statutes any provision to give COLAs to state employees or teachers. 75% of the pension plans out there do. They pre-fund them, know when they're going to be. They may be tied to CPA. They may be tied to investment returns. They may be retired to something else, but Alabama chose not to do that. And so if there is an increase, it's done by the legislature. It's considered ad hoc. So there hasn't been one since 2006 because the Governmental Accounting Board, the standards they set said, listen, if you're going to give these COLAs, you got to look at the long-term liability associated with them. And so there were a bunch of them on the books. And so Alabama's unfunded liability in both of their systems shot up when this ruling took place. And Dr. Bronner and RSA and really the board, and I agree with it. I don't think you should keep giving COLAs that you didn't pay for and adding to the liability, which is why we came up with this system I'll get to in just a second. But the ones that are out there, they've been paid down some. 17 years have gone by. But the way they account for it, you can't really see it. It's in with everything else that goes on to make unfunded liability, so you don't really know. So that's another thing I'm going to address here. So what we did, we tried to come up with a plan to allow y'all to consider COLAs again, but not add to the unfunded liability of the retirement systems. Well, how do you do that? You're used to giving bonuses. The reason Leanne and both groups went to bonuses because it was 1 year only, and it didn't go forward, and therefore no liability attached. So we came up with a process to do a similar thing with cost of living raise, and I'll just make this one up. But say you gave a 2% cost of living raise, you pay 100% of the cost for the first year. And it has to be in the budget. The legislature controls it in the budget. You'll see it in the budget. You'll see the amount of money it costs. You'll see the retirement rate that generates that kind of money. You'll see that every year in the budget document. If you don't put it in the budget, there is no payment made for that year. So it has to be done that way. It's not a recurring liability. It's an annual legislative budget item. So it goes from a RSA liability to a legislative budget item, just like salaries, just like health insurance, just like everything else you do. You do it 1 year at a time, and if you run out of money and you don't do it, it doesn't happen. You have to set it up this way, I think, to keep from having recurring liability. So if this happened, and by the way, this bill is not a pay raise bill. This bill sets up the procedure for doing this. It says in the future, if y'all ever do a COLA, this is how it's paid for. You cannot throw liability on the retirement systems anymore. You have to do it this way. You have to do it in your budget. You have to provide 100% of that year's funding for it to be effective. If you think about it, salaries, when y'all give cost of living raises for salaries, that's a forever cost. It adds to whatever you added. For the rest of the time, those salaries are that much higher. With retiree COLAs, it's just the opposite. The first year is the highest year, and that's a concept that the cost goes down each year. As salaries go up, the cost goes down, the rate drops. But you watch it each year. Each year you'll see the rate, and you'll see how much it costs. As time goes by, if it got cheap enough and the rate was small enough, you might want to look at doing a different one. But that's the way it would work. Each year the same way. It's got to be in the budget. If it's not in the budget, it doesn't get paid. Like I said, and it's considered not authorized. And so it's not even legal after September 30th of any year. So it'd be difficult for somebody to come in and say this is a recurring liability on the state, on the retirement systems. It's not a recurring liability on the legislature. You can do that anytime you want to. This pays the total cost. There's no borrowing associated here. There's no interest associated with this. Again, it's a declining expenditure. I've been around long enough to know when somebody comes asking for money, y'all like for them to ask for less than they got the year before. It'll always be lower. Unfortunately, the reason it's lower is not something you like to talk about, but there are fewer retirees each year as time ticks by, and you only pay till the last one receives the last check. And so that's the way it works. To me, that works for y'all.
Mr. Green, can you
Yes,
walk us
sir.
through an example, just a hypothetical? Do you have something in your back of your head? You can just kind of make up a hypothetical.
Let me make up one that we talked about. Let's just say for 2025, not even this budget you're dealing with, but the one after that, you wanted to give a 2% COLA to state employees. The actuary would say, okay, a 2% COLA will cost X percent, and in terms of what the total payroll of the employees' retirement system, the people that are in the employees' retirement system, you look at the total salary cost of them. What percent of that will pay for this cost to give a 2% COLA for state employees? So that's the way it's done now. You fund the retirement system by using the salaries from the funds from which salaries are paid. You attach a rate to that, and that funds the retirement system. We want to set this up the same way, but it's by itself. It's isolated in the budget so you can see it. You'll always know what an annual COLA is costing. You'll know the dollar amount. You'll know the percentage. So let's just say in the budget that y'all did for 2025, The numbers we work with, it'd be a little over 0.5% of payroll. That's what it costs that year to grant this COLA. So you'll collect the money during the year, you pay the money out by September 30th, so there's no liability anywhere. If it costs $200, you collected $200, you paid out $200. The next year, it may be $198, and you collect $198, you pay out. So that's the way it works.
Let me ask you this.
Sure.
Two questions. One, so if you go down this road, and let's say we started this fiscal year.
Right.
We just started for the 24 budget. We
Okay.
started, okay. But then Sally, state employee, and of course, we're talking about education and this, we're moving to general. Let's say Sally, Tammy, the teacher, she retires in 2026.
Right.
She wouldn't get this. This COLA is frozen to those that are in the system at the time we start.
That will be up to you when you pass a COLA bill. You'll pick the date that you had to retire by, and that's the way it always worked. And so the ones that, let's just say you chose the ones that had retired on October 1 of 2022. So we know who they are and we know how much that would cost. The one that came in 24 and retired, they haven't been hit by inflation yet. I mean, their benefit is pretty much what it was the year before. So as time goes by, depending on what inflation did, depending on what the economy did, you could look at another one later on. But you can have more than one going at one time, right, which is why you need to see it. If this one is down to where it's costing peanuts now, you may want to do another one, depending on what's happening.
Second question. So as I recall, and I certainly haven't been around here this long, in education, we had some significant raises that occurred in I'll call it the early 90s in education. If we said, okay, we're going to pick a class of people, and let's say everybody before that 1993, 94 significant raise period, everybody that retired, Sally, school teacher back in, she topped out at $31,000 a year and retired in 1989. Is that possible, going back and taking a class of extremely long-term retirees that retired at much lower wages and they've not gotten much of a COLA other than the early 2000s, and they certainly retired at a much less amount? Sally, school teacher's getting $15,000 a year.
She got
retirement.
Sally, school teacher, got raises. If she retired in '89, hers was whatever it was. It went up until 2006. 2006, it stopped for everybody. Could you do that? You could. Would you want to do that? I think you need to think that through. I looked at the ERS. I looked at last year. I looked at how many people are alive today that got the pay raise in 2006. And there were only 9,000 state employees, and that was last year. It's probably less than that now. So most of those people have moved on. So you could do a class. I don't think you'd want to when you thought it through, but I think you could do it any way you wanted to. One thing I would say is, like I said, until their pension is eaten up by inflation, there's really no need to keep adding to it, especially the recent retirees. Y'all started giving cost of living raises again, and y'all have not prohibited merit raises again. And so their salaries have kept up. When they retire, their pension's okay. Back in the old days, merit raises were frozen and there were no COLA. So a lot of people got out of government because they weren't getting any more money and they weren't going anywhere. And so they retired. And so that's different things happened. But I would say these days, these times, you wouldn't need to do one for a few years.
Okay. Let's, anybody got any questions for, Mr. Green will be available. He's not going anywhere, but we got to start moving. We got a few proponents and then some other folks I want to hear from. Anybody have a burning question for Mr. Green? All right. Thank you, Norris.
Sure.
Ms. Kelly, you wanted to comment from the local perspective, perhaps?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman and committee members. I want to thank you, Senator Orr, first of all, for bringing this bill forward and letting us have this discussion. It's something that's important. This legislation will affect all retired educators, retired state employees, and it also will be available to local government, city, counties, and public board retirees. Of course, they opt in by resolution like they do the bonus. We have worked on this. This isn't something new. We have been working on a proposal like this for several years, and just by virtue of people that retire from the state, I have 3 past presidents here. You just heard from Norris, who worked at LFO for 40 years, state comptroller, former state comptroller Bob Childry, former finance directors. They all have worked with this in the past. They understand what happened originally, why COLAs ceased to exist, the reason for that. They've served on RSA's board and in several capacities. So they certainly are experts in this area. But I just thank you all for listening and keeping an open mind moving forward with this.
Thank you. Thank you. Next, we have Bob Childry, the former comptroller. You can just kind of keep it brief, Mr. Childry.
I will,
Thank
because thank you, Mr. Chairman. I will keep it brief because my role here really is to represent issues that might be brought to our attention based on the idea of long-term liabilities and the Governmental Accounting Standards Board. So I have a lot of experience with that. I was there when the Governmental Accounting Standards Board was created. I understand what their role is. I understand why they decided that long-term liabilities were important to put on the financial records, as we all would agree with. And I would also tell you that I have spent a considerable time discussing these issues in this bill with the Governmental Accounting Standards Board. And I have, the ability to answer any questions that you might have regarding that. And I would be very much appreciative if you guys would consider this in a favorable way.
Thank you, Mr. Childry. Appreciate your being here. Next, we have Mr. MacArthur.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Mr. Chairman, it's so important that our retired folks on the state side, the education side, not be left out. For some time, this committee has focused on we don't want to transfer an unfunded liability to the retirement system. As I read this bill, and I commend it to you, I think it's a sort of like a COLA without the unfunded liability. It requires, as I understand it, the retirement system to say that this is not going to add to the unfunded liability, and I'm assuming they would base that on Gadsby. So I think it is without a problem to you. It addresses the previous problems, and I would certainly urge you to pass this format and look forward to going forward with it, Mr. Chairman. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. MacArthur. Now, I've asked the representative from RSA to kind of weigh in on this and see what concerns or what thoughts come from down the street.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. While we agree, and I think it's a great effort to try and do a retiree COLA that's not liability, unfortunately, we cannot get a sign off from our actuaries or auditors that it would not be liability. This is a completely new concept. They haven't seen it before. Actuaries and auditors are by their nature very risk averse. And so for them to come out and say it definitively wouldn't be liability, it's a difficult position for them to take. And part of the issue, it doesn't make sense on paper because like Mr. Green said, this would be a budgetary item. If you don't fund it, we don't pay it. So why would it be long-term liability? And unfortunately, with pensions, there's a lot of things that are counterintuitive. And one thing with liability is they do not consider funding when they're talking about the liabilities for a system. And so that's been the difficulty in getting Gadsby or the actuaries or auditors to definitively sign off on it. And it's something that, you wouldn't know right away if it was going to be liability. It probably wouldn't be for a few years. But we can't get anyone to say that it would not be in the future. So that's our concern. Hopefully we can continue to work on it, maybe get there.
Thank you, Ms. Scott. Any questions All right. Thank you, Ms. Scott, for kind of weighing in on the problem of getting GASB to give us some kind of definitive guidance on a vehicle like this. Last week, we have just wanted to hear from the locals again. Lauren Hodge, are you here? There you are. Would you like to remark real quickly, please?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Good morning, committee members. I'm Lauren Hodge with the Association of County Commissions. A few things. One, this new concept was introduced last week, so unfortunately, I'm not in a position to tell you counties have approved this method, so to speak. However, I can tell you that with past bonus opportunities for our county retirees, the overwhelming majority of counties, when it has been financially feasible, always choose to approve and fund those opportunities for our retirees. Second quick issue, we do have a few concerns with the language as it has been introduced. However, I'm very confident that with working through ARSEA and you, Mr. Chairman, as the sponsor, we can address our concerns. So we look forward to helping in this effort moving forward. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Any member have any question of Mr. Green or anybody else that the smarter people than we are that are in the room regarding pensions and liabilities? And we could ask Bill Newton to come up here and just sing something for us or say howdy. All right. That being said, thank you, members, for being here. One other thing I want to discuss with you, we're still looking at the tax credit, tax exemption list. We got the long list. Senator Smitherman kind of mentioned that. I met with Chairman Garrett this morning. A grocery tax cut bill has been filed in the House that will mean $150 million in year one and an additional $150 million in year three, I think. I think that's the model they're working with in the House. Want to see where that goes because that's going to influence what we need to take up with these House bills that have come up with tax credits, exemptions, and So kind of seeing where that is and then going to come with some kind of suggestion for the committee to consider as far as how we evaluate those going forward. And I'll probably be getting with some of you all on the floor if I can get with all of you good with probably early next week on that. Okay, any questions? Thank you for your patience. Thank you for being here. We are adjourned. The F&T committee has canceled. I just got word. So if you're here for Finance and Taxation General Fund, you can go elsewhere.